The Torah tells us that when Jacob was, during the last days of his life, he spoke to his son Joseph. Yaakov spoke to Yosef. And amongst the things that he told him was that he spoke of a certain victory he had against the Amorites. And to use his words, he said that the victory which he'd had, the war that he'd won, he said, the war I'd won with my sword and with my bow. The war I'd won with my sword and my bow. The classical translation we have into Aramaic by the great sage who lived in Roman times, Onkelos, is that instead of, he translates the words my sword and my bow, my prayers and my pleading. And that's very, very unusual, because the role of the translator is simply to translate and not to interpret. And yet, for those words, my sword and my bow, he uses the words my prayers and my pleading. How do we understand that? One of our rabbis, Rabbi Shalom Shvadron, explains that since it says my sword and my bow, and a sword and a bow is not something that's unique. It's not custom-made swords, especially for a man like Yaakov. Jacob was a man of peace, was a scholar. We can't imagine him having a special sword that would be considered my sword, or a special bow that would be considered my bow. Therefore, what he was obviously speaking about, some other tools, other utensils, war instruments that he had, which could be described as my sword and my bow. And those instruments of war were his prayers and his pleading. Therefore, that must be the explanation. In other words, it's not just an interpretation; it's really a translation. When Jacob speaks about my sword and my bow, he is referring to his prayers and his pleading. That is the only thing possible. Otherwise, it would not be something unique to him. But then the question becomes, if that's so, then why does the Torah not write that? Why does the Torah not write about the war that he won with his prayers and his pleading? Why does it speak about the war that he won with his bow, with his sword and his bow? And the answer to that is that often we tend to look at the physical, material elements of a war. A war is made up of soldiers, and the soldiers have weapons, and they have tanks and planes and bombs and missiles and rifles and machine guns. And that we consider as the particles, that's the elements which create a battle. But there is another front in a battle, and that front are the heavens. The heavens are the real front. If a war is won in the heavens, so then the war is won down below. This is one of our major teachings. There's a verse that speaks about how the nations of the world fight with chariots and with horses. That's how they fight their wars. But we fight our wars by calling on the heavens. And what is it we're doing when we're calling the heavens? What are we trying to achieve by calling the heavens? We're looking to align ourselves and to live our lives the way the heavens want us to live our lives. To align our lives, our whole lifestyles, our thoughts, that we are living the way that the heavens wish us to live. This is really what we're doing when we call out for heavenly help. The analogy to explain that is, if you imagine you're walking on a road, but then you take a wrong turning, and on that wrong turning you suddenly come up against a wall, and the wall doesn't allow you to proceed. So you look at that wall as something frustrating, an annoyance that's stopping your progress. But really the wall is doing you a favor, because the wall is stopping you from going the wrong way. If we align our lifestyle to the correct lifestyle, then we can ensure peace for ourselves. Now the present situation may be that we need to fight a war. We need to live both in upper world and in this lower world. We have to live in this mundane world as normal people. We have to eat and drink and sleep, and we have to do all the things that we need to do, including fighting wars. Obviously all this is part of life. However, if we understand that our main focus is what are they saying about us in heaven, what is it that they want from us in heaven, and we make that the priority, so then the assistance will come to us, heavenly assistance will come to us to achieve what we need to achieve. And we will have the victory. A physical victory is never enough, because really ultimately the victory is to make peace with our enemies. And if our enemies continue to hate us and to feel oppressed, so while we might push them down, in a sense it's like pushing down a spring. You push down a spring and it stays down only as long as you're pushing, but if you release it for even a second, it's already jumping back. So that obviously is not the situation we want. We want some sort of permanent peace, and that can only come with special heavenly blessing. And that heavenly blessing can only come when we align ourselves and we learn to live our lives. That is exactly what Jacob meant, what Yaakov meant, that his victory came through his prayers and his pleading. We should be praying and pleading for guidance to live the type of lives that lead to peace, everlasting peace for ourselves, for our families, our community, our nation, and for our world.